The thing about being the only human at Galactic University is that everyone treats you like you're made of cotton candy and dreams. Seriously. On my first day, the admissions officer tried to assign me a personal gravity reducer because they assumed Earth's standard 1G would crush my delicate bones. I had to explain that, no, actually, I quite enjoyed having my internal organs properly arranged. Thank you very much. My name's Alex R.H.S., and I'm what the galactic community calls a Deathworlder. Though, honestly, you wouldn't know it by how everyone treats me. Sure, Earth has its challenges, gravity that would squish half my classmates, atmospheric pressure that could pop others like balloons at a dart convention, and enough bacteria to give our medical staff recurring nightmares. But somehow, I'm the fragile one. Take Professor Nix Vell, my xenobiology 401 instructor. They're basically a sentient lava lamp with 3 PhDs and an attitude problem. Every time I walk into their classroom, their gelatinous form ripples with what I can only describe as anxious concern, like they're expecting me to spontaneously combust from the effort of existing. "Ah, Student Rhodes," they burbled during today's class, their voice coming from somewhere within their translucent mass. "Do be careful with the new holo displays. They're calibrated for standard class 3 planetary environments." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. "Professor, we've been over this. I'm not going to break from touching school equipment." A concerned ripple passed through their form. Yes, but your species' unique calcium-based support structure." "You mean bones?" I interrupted, a smile tugging at my lips. "Is rather primitive and susceptible to trauma," they continued, not catching my sarcasm. From across the room, VX let out a sound like sandpaper scraping against metal, their version of a smug chuckle. Picture a walking silicon crystal with an ego the size of a small moon, and you've got VX. "Perhaps Student Rhodes should observe from behind a protective barrier," VX chimed in. "I've read that humans require constant environmental controls to survive." "That's a spacesuit, you geometric gossip," I muttered under my breath as I slid into my seat. "I only need one when I'm, in space." Zephyr, a crystalline being who somehow managed to be less dense than VX, despite literally being made of living crystal, chimed in with their bell-like voice. "Is it true humans have to shut down for 8 hours every day just to prevent system failure?" "It's called sleep," I shot back, "and bold of you to judge when you spend 3 days a week in photosynthesis mode." The only one who didn't regularly treat me like I was about to shatter was Mio, a fuzzy empath who looked like someone had given sentience to a dryer's lint trap. They bounced excitedly in their hover seat next to me, their fur rippling with genuine curiosity rather than condescension. "Alex? Alex?" they said, their voice filled with excitement. "I watched more of those Earth nature documentaries you recommended. The ones about your world's microfauna. Those tardigrades are absolutely fascinating." I didn't have the heart to tell them that tardigrades were microscopic. Let them keep thinking Earth's most resilient creature was the size of a public transport pod. It was kind of adorable. Professor Nix Vell's form coalesced at the front of the classroom, their educational credentials floating in suspended animation within their transparent body. "Show off," I muttered under my breath. "Class, today we begin our unit on evolutionary adaptation and natural predators. Each student will present on their homeworld's most formidable hunter, examining the environmental pressures that shape their development." A ripple of excitement passed through the class. Well, literally, through some of them. "We've got a lot of semi-corporeal beings here at GU. Student Rhodes," the professor continued, their tone dripping with what they probably thought was kindness, but came across as patronizing. "Given Earth's relatively sheltered environment, you may choose to present on one of your world's less threatening creatures. Perhaps one of those endothermic comfort companions your species keeps." "You mean a cat?" I asked, already fighting the urge to slouch. "If you're comfortable discussing such an apex predator." A chorus of amusement rippled through the room. Everyone started chiming in with thoughts on the mighty Earth Cat, while Mio bounced up and down in her seat, fur rippling in delight. I smiled. Not my usual sarcastic grin, but the kind of smile that made our ancient ancestors the apex predators of Earth. The kind of smile that says, "I know something you don't, and you're not going to like it." "Actually, Professor," I said, pulling out my data pad, "I'd like to tell the class about an Earth species called Carcharodon carcharias, but you might know it better by its common name." I clicked a button, and the first image of my presentation popped up on the screen. The great white shark. The room went silent. Well, except for VX, who made a sound like a chalkboard having a stroke. The room was deathly silent. I could practically feel the collective shift in the air as the image of the great white shark filled the holographic screen. Its menacing silhouette loomed, teeth sharp and ready for the kill. The students stared at the image, their expressions a mix of disbelief and curiosity, like they'd just encountered the creature that would bring about their extinction. Professor Nix Vell was the first to recover, though their gelatinous form rippled with unmistakable anxiety. "I must insist, Professor Rhodes," they began, their voice quivering with what I could only describe as genuine concern, "that you consider the sensitivities of our students when presenting such traumatic material." I tilted my head, pretending to think about it for a moment before responding. "Did you know," I said cheerfully, "that they're not even our most dangerous predators? They're just my personal favorite." Mio's fur stood on end. "What? Not the most dangerous? What could possibly be worse than that?" they asked, their voice tinged with a mixture of awe and horror. "Ah, well," I continued, a grin tugging at my lips, "let me tell you about their teeth." I zoomed in on the shark's jaw, showing the rows of serrated teeth, each one sharper than the last. Sharks have multiple rows of teeth. When one falls out, another just rotates forward to replace it, like a conveyor belt of evolutionary perfection. A ripple of shock passed through the room. I could feel Mayo's fur start to frantically cycle through various shades of confusion and awe. Zephyr's crystalline form began to shimmer nervously, like they were about to disintegrate under the pressure of the knowledge I was dropping. Professor Nix Vell, attempting to regain some control, continued. "Yes, but surely, Student Rhodes, you must understand the intense evolutionary pressures that shaped such savage creatures. How could they possibly survive such brutal conditions?" "Well," I said, leaning back in my chair and tapping through my presentation, "here's where things get interesting. You see, sharks have been around for over 450 million years. That's older than trees. They've survived multiple mass extinction events, wiped out almost every other species on Earth, but sharks, they're still going strong." Mio's fur went from excitement to full-blown panic. "They survived extinction events?" they whispered, barely able to process what they were hearing. "Oh yeah," I said with a shrug. "You see, sharks have evolved to be the perfect predators. They're excellent at hunting, and they can sense a single drop of blood in an entire Olympic-sized swimming pool of water." The room seemed to shrink as the enormity of what I was saying sunk in. Even VX, who had spent most of the semester acting like I was a fragile, breakable object, was starting to look less smug and more, well, terrified. "You've got to be kidding," VX said, their voice tinged with disbelief. How can such a creature exist? What kind of reality are we even talking about here?" I clicked the next part of my presentation, a hologram of the shark breaching the surface of the water, flying out in a smooth arc before crashing back down with terrifying force, a seal in its jaws. "That's how they hunt," I said. "They surprise their prey from below. They hit the surface at full speed, launching themselves entirely out of the water to catch their prey in one smooth motion." Zephyr's crystallized form gave off a faint trembling sound, the equivalent of a gasp in their species. Mayo's fur was flickering, a kaleidoscope of colors reflecting their growing anxiety. But why? Zephyr asked, their bell-like voice shaking with the pressure of learning something they clearly weren't ready to process. Why would they go to such lengths for food? Is it for survival? I raised an eyebrow, impressed at their attempt to grasp the concept. Survival? Sure, but it's more than that. It's evolutionary perfection. They've had millions of years to perfect their technique. They're designed to hunt, and they do it with grace and power. I switched the hologram to the next sequence, a feeding frenzy. Multiple sharks circling a school of fish, each one of them diving into the chaos, their powerful jaws snapping at anything that moves. The water churned with the ferocity of the hunt. Mayo gasped, their fur rippling with panic. They hunt in groups? Yup, I replied, a smirk playing at the corner of my lips. Group feeding events. They coordinate and they go for the kill together. The class was visibly shaken now. VX had started to physically withdraw into their own crystalline structure, their edges beginning to crack as the pressure mounted. Zephyr's surface was covered in what looked like distress signals, tiny cracks appearing across their surface as their internal systems seemed to be overloaded by the information. Professor Nix Vell let out a strained burble, trying to regain control of the class. I believe we've seen enough of these creatures for today. But I wasn't done yet. Oh, but Professor, I haven't even gotten to the best part yet. I pulled up the final hologram, an Earth-Ocean ecosystem diagram. Sharks are just the beginning, I said, voice gleaming with excitement. They're not even our most dangerous marine predator. That honor goes to orcas. A wave of disbelief washed over the room. Orcas? Mio repeated, their voice barely a whisper. But I thought they were just dolphins? Ha! I laughed. Oh no. Orcas are the apex of marine predators. They're intelligent enough to create hunting strategies on the fly, and they even teach these strategies to younger orcas. They're terrifyingly smart. VX was now practically vibrating with anxiety. Zephyr's form was shimmering so violently that I feared it might collapse in on itself. The entire class was at a loss for words, and I could see Mio's fur was cycling through an assortment of emotions, fear, awe, curiosity, all of them amplified to extremes. Would you like to hear about the colossal squid? I asked, completely in my element now. We're still not sure how big they can get. They live so deep in our oceans that we've only recently discovered their full potential. The class was practically in a state of panic by now. They were reeling, trying to comprehend how Earth could be home to such terrifying and perfect predators. But I wasn't finished. And remember, I added with a grin, we've only explored about 5% of Earth's oceans. Imagine what else is down there. At that, VX finally snapped. Their crystalline form shattered into 47 pieces, scattering across the classroom in what could only be described as an existential meltdown. The cleanup crew was called in as usual. Professor Nix Vell, who had lost cohesion for what felt like the 100th time, could only manage a weak, student Rhodes. I think we've had enough for today. But the best part? I hadn't even gotten to the honey badger yet. The next day at Galactic University was quieter than usual. Or perhaps it was just my imagination, given that half the student body had yet to recover from the sheer shock of my great white shark presentation. It had been the talk of the campus, and by now even the faculty had been caught in the ripples of the news. After all, who wouldn't be fascinated by the Deathworlder who casually introduced a creature that could disembowel you with a single swish of its tail and then devour you in seconds? As I walked through the hallways to my next class, I noticed something unusual. There was a buzz in the air. More specifically, there were students actively avoiding eye contact with me, making swift exits when I came into view. VX was nowhere to be seen, though I suspected they had taken a personal day to reassemble their shattered crystalline form. I had a sneaking suspicion that my reputation had preceded me. Mio, however, was still as enthusiastic as ever. They bounced alongside me, their fur still shimmering in the aftermath of the shark presentation. Alex, you should have seen the look on their faces when you mentioned the orcas. They didn't know what hit them, and that thing you said about the colossal squid, they're still trying to figure out the math on that one. I couldn't help but grin. Mio was like a sponge, soaking up every detail about Earth's wildlife, despite the utter trauma it caused them. They had been filming everything in the classroom, and I was fairly certain they'd created a documentary that would have viral potential across the quantum net. Yeah, I replied. The whole "we haven't even scratched the surface" bit really seemed to throw them. It was almost too easy. We walked into the next lecture hall together, and I was greeted by the usual anxious ripples in the air. Zephyr, VX's usual foil, was hovering at the back, looking less like their usual serene self and more like an explosion waiting to happen. Their form flickered with an ominous light whenever they glanced my way. Apparently, my shark presentation had taken a toll on them, but I wasn't surprised. Not many beings in the galaxy had the fortitude to comprehend Earth's ecosystem, let alone thrive in it. I made my way to my seat, still savoring the delicious feeling of knowing that I had shaken up Galactic University in a way no one would soon forget. "Student Rhodes!" Professor Nix Vell's voice suddenly interrupted my reverie. They were trying, and failing, to maintain their usual composure, their gelatinous form rippling with what could only be described as barely contained stress. "I hope you've been reviewing the material for today's class. We will be discussing another one of your planet's apex predators." "Don't worry, Professor," I said, leaning back in my chair and giving them a smile that I knew would do nothing to ease their anxiety. "I've got something even better than sharks for you today." Mio's fur rippled in excitement beside me. "Better than sharks? How is that even possible?" I grinned, pulling up my datapad again. "Oh, trust me, this one is special." With a flourish, I clicked through the holograms, showing off the first image, a furry little creature with a face that was all teeth, claws, and absolute defiance. "The honey badger," I said simply. "Meet Earth's most fearless apex predator." The room fell silent as my classmates tried to process what they were seeing. They were expecting something big, maybe another terrifying marine beast, or something massive that could tear through entire ecosystems. Instead, I had presented them with a creature that, in comparison, seemed, well, adorable. Professor Nix Vell's form shimmered with confusion. "A badger? This creature is your apex predator?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Oh, it's so much more than that." I clicked to the next hologram. A honey badger attacking a venomous snake, relentlessly biting and shaking it like it was no more than a rag doll. The footage was short but brutal, and I could practically feel the collective shudder that rippled through the class. "Let me explain," I said, enjoying their discomfort. "Honey badgers are so fearless that they'll attack animals 10 times their size without hesitation. They take on snakes, lions, even crocodiles, and they usually come out on top. They don't fear anything because they know they can survive almost anything." A few gasps echoed around the room. Even Zephyr's shimmering surface flickered with what I could only describe as genuine panic. "Wait a second," VX's voice came from the back, still recovering from the shark incident. "You're telling me this tiny thing takes on a lion?" I smiled, pressing forward. "Exactly. They're not fast, they're not particularly strong, but what they lack in physical prowess, they make up for in sheer, unshakable courage. And that's what makes them one of Earth's most dangerous predators." I could see the logic starting to click in Mio's head. "So they don't just hunt for survival. They're hunting to prove something, aren't they?" "Exactly," I said. The honey badger doesn't back down from a fight. It's so aggressive, so determined that it can face even the most terrifying threats head-on. Professor Nix Vell, clearly trying to keep their composure, added, I suppose this is a useful lesson on the importance of resilience in the face of danger. I nodded, clicking through to the next hologram. A close-up of a honey badger taking a sting from a venomous snake, only to keep going as if nothing had happened. They even have a legendary resistance to venom, I continued. This little guy can be bitten by the deadliest snakes, but they still keep going. It's like they're made of pure willpower. Mio bounced excitedly in their seat, their fur now an odd mix of admiration and disbelief. So, this little thing is just indestructible? Basically, I said. They don't care about danger. They don't care about size. They just do what they want. The entire class was silent, processing the strange, almost alien concept of a creature that didn't fear anything. Even Zephyr's surface, which had been flickering with distress earlier, was now calm, though it still seemed uneasy at the idea of such unyielding bravery. I've got one last thing to show you, I said, bringing up a final hologram. A slow-motion video of the honey badger charging at a much larger animal, claws bared, with no regard for its own safety. This is what Earth is like, I added, the satisfaction clear in my voice. This is what it means to survive here. We have creatures who, against all odds, keep pushing forward. We've got animals that'll throw themselves into the most dangerous situations and just say, bring it on. The class was speechless. The terror they'd felt during the shark presentation was nothing compared to the utter disbelief that came with understanding the relentless, fearless nature of Earth's predators. As the class ended, I couldn't help but feel a bit proud of myself. I had done what no one else at Galactic University had managed to do. I had made them understand that Earth was no ordinary world. It was a death world, a place where survival wasn't a given, but a constant, brutal struggle. And as I walked out of the lecture hall, Mio trailing behind, still processing the honey badger footage, I knew something had changed. No longer would I be treated like the fragile, delicate human. Now, I was the one they feared, the one they respected. After all, if you could survive on a planet like Earth, you could survive anywhere. The aftermath of my honey badger presentation had a ripple effect that I hadn't quite anticipated. It wasn't just that the class was in shock. It was that the entire faculty seemed to be reconsidering everything they knew about Earth. News traveled fast in a university full of telepaths, empaths, and beings who communicated through quantum entanglement. By the end of the day, I was the talk of Galactic University. "Alex? Alex?" Mio called excitedly as they caught up to me in the hallway. "Did you hear? Some of the quantum scholars want to meet with you. They're fascinated by how you described Earth's survival instincts. They're even asking if there's a way to use your examples to improve resilience training for their species." I stopped in my tracks, raising an eyebrow. Wait, are they seriously asking me to help teach resilience training? Mio's fur rippled with amusement. They said they've never seen anything like it. Some of them are considering starting a new course on Earth's survival philosophy. You're kind of a sensation. I couldn't help but laugh, though I wasn't sure if the idea of me teaching others how to survive in the galaxy was reassuring or terrifying. Me? The expert on survival? The human who barely got through a morning without spilling coffee on their shirt? Right, sure, I said, still grinning. If they want lessons on how to survive by sheer willpower and stubbornness, I'm their guy. The Honey Badger School of Thought. Mio bounced beside me, eyes wide. Can I film it? I want to make another documentary about you. The Deathworlder who taught resilience to the galaxy. I rolled my eyes but gave them an exaggerated nod. Sure, just make sure to use a dramatic soundtrack. We entered the main lecture hall where the rest of the class was already gathering. The atmosphere was different now, strangely quiet. there were still lingering whispers, but they were not about the great white shark or the honey badger. No, the buzz was about me and what I'd become. The Deathworlder who had turned the Galactic University upside down. As I settled into my seat, I noticed Professor Nix Vell at the front of the room. Their gelatinous form was less jittery than usual, but it still pulsed with a slight unease. Zephyr, too, seemed a little more composed today. Perhaps my presentation had given them a bit of perspective on Earth's tenacity. Still, I could see the faint glimmer of nervousness in their crystalline body whenever they glanced in my direction. Professor Nix Vell cleared their throat, sending a ripple through their form. "Students," they began, their voice steady but edged with uncertainty. "Today's class will be a continuation of our study on evolutionary adaptation, and we have a new guest lecturer joining us." Everyone turned to me. Of course they did. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I stood up, feeling a little more self-assured than I'd ever felt before. "Hello, everyone," I said, with an exaggerated bow. "You asked for it, so here I am, Earth's ultimate survival expert." The class's collective anxiety buzzed through the air like static electricity. Zephyr, VX, and even Mio looked at me with wide, eager eyes. The tension was palpable, and for the first time I realized that the tide had shifted. I wasn't just the fragile human anymore. I was the one with the answers, the one with the knowledge, the one who had survived the impossible. I clicked through to my next presentation. The holograms began to fill the room with images of Earth's harshest environments, the freezing tundras of the Arctic, the blistering deserts of Africa, the torrential rains of the Amazon rainforest. "On Earth," I began, pacing slightly, "survival isn't just about physical strength. It's about adapting. It's about being able to withstand what no one thinks you can survive. Every corner of this planet has creatures that can withstand extremes that would cripple most life forms." I tapped the data pad, bringing up an image of a polar bear in the icy wastes of the Arctic. The polar bear, for example, lives in temperatures so cold that most other species would freeze in minutes, and yet it thrives. It has an insulating layer of fat and fur, and its metabolism is designed to keep it going in the most inhospitable environment on Earth. Professor Nix Vell was listening intently, but their form was still rippling with visible concern. "And you believe this? This mindset is what defines survival on Earth?" "Absolutely," I said confidently. "It's not about brute strength. It's about being in tune with your environment and finding ways to adapt. The polar bear doesn't fight against the cold. It works with it. It thrives in the harshest conditions because it has the right tools for the job." Zephyr's crystalline form chime rang as they asked, "And what about those creatures that don't have physical defenses, like the smaller life forms?" "Great question," I replied. "It's all about resilience. Take the tardigrade, for example, the water bear. It's microscopic, but it can survive in the vacuum of space, endure extreme radiation, and withstand freezing and boiling temperatures. No weapons, no claws, just sheer adaptability." "Adaptability," Mayo echoed, their voice full of wonder. "I see now. Earth's strength is in its ability to change, to evolve with the environment." "Exactly," I said, feeling the excitement build. "On Earth, we don't run from danger. We face it head-on, adapt, and thrive. We've been doing it for millions of years." The class was rapt. Even VX, who had been incredibly smug and condescending earlier, seemed to be processing the magnitude of what I was saying. I noticed that their crystalline surface, which had been fractured after the shark presentation, was now glowing a little less defensively. "You're teaching us something important," Zephyr chimed in, their surface giving off a soft, melodic hum. "You're teaching us that survival isn't just about being the strongest. It's about knowing your limits and finding ways to overcome them." "Exactly," I replied, my voice rising in enthusiasm. We humans, we're not the biggest, we're not the strongest, but we've got one thing the rest of the galaxy could learn from: determination. We can adapt to the most extreme situations because we never stop fighting. We've survived and thrived where others would have perished. Professor Nix Vell, now visibly calmer than before, nodded slowly. Perhaps we've underestimated your species, they admitted. Your evolutionary resilience is indeed remarkable. I couldn't help but smile. It's not just about surviving, Professor. It's about living. That's what Earth teaches us every single day. As the class ended, I realized something. This wasn't just about proving that Earth was a tough place to survive. This was about proving that humans could do more than just survive in the galaxy. They could thrive. And I, Alex RHS, was finally earning the respect I deserved. As Mayo bounced beside me, still filming, I could see the future opening up ahead of me. I wasn't just a human in a galaxy full of strange beings anymore. I was a living testament to the strength and resilience of Earth, and I was ready to share that with anyone who was brave enough to listen. It didn't take long for the aftermath of my last lecture to settle into something that felt almost normal. After all, it had been a week since I'd casually shattered everyone's understanding of what it meant to survive on Earth. The shockwaves had reverberated through the halls of Galactic University, but now I found myself walking through those same halls with something entirely different on my mind: respect. Everywhere I went, I felt the subtle shift. Students who once avoided eye contact with me now nodded with a mixture of admiration and something else. Curiosity, maybe. Some even went so far as to ask me questions about Earth's wildlife, their voices filled with genuine interest rather than the condescension I had grown used to. It wasn't just about the honey badger anymore. It was about the entire way Earth functioned as a world, brutal, unforgiving, and yet full of life that thrived in the most extreme conditions. As I made my way to the campus library, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come in just a short time. From the fragile human they thought would break under the weight of a mild breeze, to the one who now lectured on Earth's survival strategies, I had come to realize that it wasn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It was about being able to adapt, to learn, and to survive when every other species thought you didn't stand a chance. The library, a sprawling structure of living data streams and floating holograms, was quieter than usual. Mayo was there, as always, holding a recording device with a look of utter fascination on their face. Their fur was a soft, pulsing pattern of calming hues, an odd mix of respect and amusement. Alex, Mayo bounced toward me, practically vibrating with energy. Guess what? The Xenobiology department wants to officially update their curriculum on Earth's predators based on your lectures. They're even considering adding a section on your species' survival strategies. I raised an eyebrow. They want to make me a case study? Not just any case study, Mio said excitedly. A highlight of the curriculum. You're going to be a galactic sensation. There are already courses being proposed based on your lectures, like Deathworlder survival in an extinction-prone galaxy and evolutionary perfection, Earth's approach to extreme resilience. I laughed, shaking my head. That's insane. I mean, I never thought I'd be teaching survival tactics to intergalactic beings. You're more of a sensation than you think, Mayo said, glancing at the door of the library where several students were still gathered in a hushed discussion about my recent teachings. You're becoming a symbol of survival for the entire galaxy. They even added a note in the student handbook: beware of Earthlings. You think you're tough. They've got you beat. I chuckled, enjoying the absurdity of it all. If there was one thing I had learned through this whole experience, it was that the universe had a funny way of flipping the script. One moment, you're the fragile human who everyone thinks is going to break under the pressure, and the next, you're the living proof that survival is more than just brute force. It's about resilience, adaptability, and most importantly, never giving up. Have you ever thought about what's next? Mio asked. their voice shifting from playful curiosity to a more serious tone. "You're already a legend here. What happens when you go back to Earth? What will they think of you?" I paused, thinking about it for a moment. Earth had always felt like home, but now I wasn't sure how to look at it anymore. What would it be like to return to a place that had once felt small, where the struggles were often about things that now seemed trivial? The universe was vast, and the knowledge I had gained here from these incredibly diverse beings made me realize that Earth was just one small part of a much bigger picture. But at the same time, I realized something else. Earth didn't just survive because of its creatures. It survived because of its people, the ones who never stopped pushing the boundaries, who never gave in to the pressures that threatened to crush them. And I knew that if I ever did return, I would carry that resilience with me. "Maybe," I said, turning to Mayo with a smile, "I'll keep going. I'll keep teaching. Not just here, but everywhere. There's a lot more to Earth than just sharks and honey badgers. I want to show them the heart of Earth, the spirit that keeps us going no matter what." Mayo's eyes gleamed with admiration. "I like that," they said. "You'll be the Deathworlder who showed the galaxy how to live." "Maybe," I said, looking out into the library where an array of students from all corners of the galaxy were now discussing Earth's creatures. "Maybe I'm already doing that." The future was wide open, full of possibilities, and as I walked through the bustling corridors of Galactic University, I knew one thing for sure. No matter where I went or what I did, I would always be proud to be human. Because on Earth, we didn't just survive, we thrived. Epilogue. The story of the human who broke Xenobiology 401 continued to spread across the galaxy for years. Galactic University updated its curriculum, and Earth's classification was revised in the Galactic database. Earth went from being a protected habitat to an extreme caution world, a place where the creatures and people who called it home were seen not as fragile, but as the living, breathing example of survival against all odds. As for me, I kept teaching, kept sharing what I had learned. The universe was full of challenges, but I knew one thing. If we could survive Earth, we could survive anything.